Hey guys, Dave here. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you've had a pretty good week or so in the stock market. I know Rocket Lab has been performing very well lately. We had a 10% plus move today. It's been very exciting to see. So if you're a Rocket Lab shareholder, hope you've been enjoying the ride. I know it was pretty rough back when we dropped down below the threes again, but looks like that was a pretty good buying opportunity, at least compared to how the stock's sitting now. If you're not a Rocket Lab shareholder, I hope your other stocks have done well. Let me know down below in the comments what companies you own and that have been performing well over the last couple weeks. I was thinking yesterday that I really haven't gone into the data, the spreadsheets, the charts a lot lately on Rocket Lab. Really think it's overdue for me to check in on my financial projections and see how the company is performing against those projections I made back early-ish in 2021, see how they're faring, see what kind of updates I need to make. Of course, we don't have the Q4 numbers quite yet for Rocket Lab. I'm really looking forward to that earnings call that was announced recently in February. Hopefully, we'll also get some guidance for 2023 and get an idea of what kind of numbers we can expect. But we do know a lot. We know the results for the first 3 quarters of 2022, and we have pretty solid projections from the company for what Q4 should be. So they may miss or beat by a little bit, but we should really know what the ballpark is going to be. So I wanted to put together a few graphs and charts just to see high level how the company's been performing. Are they meeting the expectations that I set back in 2021 when I first set up my valuation model, and what updates need to be made? So if you're interested in seeing that, let's dive over to the spreadsheets. Okay, so first up, here is that model I made way back when I first started researching Rocket Lab. I probably haven't referenced it enough lately, but we put in a bunch of numbers for what we kind of expect revenues to be all the way up to 2027. We also put in R&D expenses, EBITDA, all these things. We came out with what we think their value will be in 2027 based on a price to earnings multiple of 25. Now, obviously, I feel that this is very conservative. If the company does continue to grow at the rate that we have projected here, the multiple should probably be much higher than 25 in my opinion, but that depends on a lot of things, including the overall macro markets and what kind of interest rates we're seeing from the Fed. They've been going up and up lately, so if they continue to stay high for longer than expected, that could be a real drag on growth stocks and the stock market in general, causing these multiples to be a bit lower. Hard to say what'll happen that far in the future, but we do want to check in on these numbers and see how the company is performing against them. So we can see that we had a revenue number of just shy of 200 million projected for 2022, and various R&D expenses estimates. I really just generated these based on things I heard in the earnings call and stuff like that. I really don't expect it to be exact. There's basically no way it would be right on, but hopefully we're in the right ballpark, and that can give us an idea of what the company's worth. So we know now that we are looking at about $200 million for 2022. Let's head over and see what revenues we are actually looking at for the... Okay, so this is our first chart, and I've charted out our revenues for obviously 2020, 2021, and 2022. The 2022 number, obviously Q4 is an estimate, but it should be pretty close going off of our revised guidance. We've already taken into account that launch that didn't happen and stuff like that. So this has actually come down a little bit, but we are still looking at about $205 million in revenue for the year, which is actually a nice little beat versus my $199 million number. So actually they're slightly outperforming that projection I made back early in 2021, which is great to see. Always happy with that. And if you look at the year-over-year growth, it's actually quite crazy. We're looking at 330% growth. You don't see that every day. You barely ever see that. Of course, 2021 was a really rough year for the company, but this is a massive jump. So I like to see this kind of chart, and hopefully we do see revenue continue. That's not all though. So if we look at our cash reserves, I think this gives you a better idea of the story, because basically a lot of this revenue was fueled by our acquisitions. So as the company spent cash reserves to acquire these third-party companies and bring them in under the Rocket Lab umbrella, adding to the revenues of the company, we're burning down our cash reserves, and that really goes to show. So from 2021, right after we went public with the SPAC, we had cash reserves of $774 million. At the end of 2022, or I should say at the end of Q3 2022, and we're now looking at closer to $500 million, although there are some other items on the balance sheet that makes that look a little bit better in terms of the value of inventory and stuff like that. You could say that they have some more value on the balance sheet, but that's just the pure cash, $500 million. So as we spent that money on acquiring companies, you can see what it's really done to the revenue, jumping from 60 million-ish, 62 million to 205 million. Absolutely outstanding. And the nice thing is you're spending money and stock to acquire these companies one time, and this is really annual recurring revenue that's even growing. So we have a one-time hit to our cash reserves for hopefully accretive cash flow that continues to grow in the future. I'm pretty okay with these numbers. We do want to keep an eye on our cash reserves, of course, and make sure we have enough before they become profitable. Just looking at the revenue growth on a percentage basis, not too much to see here, but you can see from 2020 to 2021, we had 56% revenue growth, which is honestly great, but pales in comparison to that 330 number. You can't expect that kind of number every year. I mean, you only have so much cash on the balance sheet that you can use to acquire these companies, so you can't just keep, buying more revenue forever. We need to see internal growth, which is also included in these numbers, and the internal growth is coming. We have had a lot of organic growth from the company as well as these acquisitions. In terms of the revenue growth for 2023 expected, going back to my original projections, I had around 287 million revenue roughly projected. That might have to come down a little bit. I've been thinking about our new projections for how many launches we're going to have that we were given at the end of Q3, and as well some ideas about how rapidly Space Systems is going to grow. I'm thinking we might need to lower that slightly, but I'm really going to wait until Q4, and hopefully we get some better ideas on the guidance for next year and get a better understanding of what we're looking at. But this is what my original projection would look like. So the growth would slow a little bit next year, but that's still pretty solid growth on a percentage basis. In terms of net income, as you know, or you probably know if you're a Rocket Lab investor, they still have not broken even. So this is where I was off quite a bit in terms of my 2022 numbers for my forecast. I obviously didn't really expect the amount of expenses that they would be incurring, mostly developing Neutron, I do believe, as well as spending money on Electron reusability. So my forecast was that their net income would be down around negative 75 million, and it's actually all the way to negative 134 million. So definitely need to put in some work on that original forecast, make some adjustments. I think I underestimated the amount of spending Neutron would require and how it would go. So when I originally made the forecast, I kind of thought it would be kind of a steady line towards profitability, where we would slowly, gradually get more and more profitable until we break even. But I actually think it's kind of more like an S. So we're actually, as we get closer and closer to Neutron launching, we're going to drop more and more into the negatives in terms of spending all that money that we're not recognizing any income off of it yet, before we shoot up profitable once we finally get Neutron launching. So I think the model does need some adjusting, and I will be looking forward to doing that soon. So just some quotes I took from the Q3 earnings call, which are kind of informing my thoughts on these models. We have Adam Spice, the CFO, when being asked about when the company will reach profitability. And he basically said that while most of the elements of our business have been ramping well, we're still in the early stages of our Neutron development and investments. So achieving and sustaining profitability can really only happen once we've got the majority of the R&D spending for Neutron in the rearview mirror. So I think the best way to look at it, it's really, we've got a couple things converging. We have an increase and kind of sustained investment in Neutron. And of course, that will come to a crescendo as we approach launch. So as I was saying before, it sounds like we're really going to increase that spending up until we get Neutron launching. So I really need to make some adjustments there to the valuation. But we still need the rest of the business to grow and perform to overcome that investment in Neutron. So a lot of those other businesses like Electron or Space Systems are profitable and can help offset all that Neutron spending, so the hit to the balance sheet isn't quite as harsh. We have heard before that Neutron launch date would be hopefully 2024. To be honest, it wouldn't really surprise me if it got pushed to 2025. These rockets always seem to be late. I do have a lot of confidence in the Rocket Lab team, but you know, lots of things happen, and a first successful launch of 2025 would still be extremely fast development for a rocket. And then we do have another question from analyst Matt Akers. Just wanted to ask about next year and run rate for growth, as well as the different segments, if there's any thoughts on that. I thought this was pretty interesting. Right now, the estimated launches for next year are around 14, which is a 14% in growth year over year. And that number is actually what I plugged into the Rocket Lab data here when I was estimating revenue growth for next year. I added 40% to the launch side of the business, which would bring you up to about $94 million, and Space Systems is a little bit tougher to figure out. I have it pegged at about $186 million, but that one really could vary. I don't have a lot of firm information on that, unfortunately. Continuing on, he said we're looking at $7 to $7.5 million per launch. I'm hopeful that number will actually come up in future years. And then when we look at the Space Systems business, we really have 5 verticals within Space Systems, and we see solid growth from 4 of the 5 areas. So this solid growth, I mean, it sounds good. It's a little vague. Let me know what you think is solid growth: 30%, 40%, 50%, 25%. If you hear him saying that we're expecting solid growth, what kind of number would you personally expect for the Space System side of the business? Obviously, the 5th area that we're not going to experience so much solid growth is the SolAero. And part of that reason is that they're manufacturing panels for internal satellite projects, but those full satellites will not be delivered next year. So that revenue for that work does not actually get recognized until later on, and it's a bit of a delayed revenue recognition. We're also looking at seeing SolAero hopefully improve much more 2024 and beyond. So those are just some charts for you today. How do you feel about Rocket Lab's revenue growth? Is it meeting your expectations? Do you think they'll beat that number I set next year? Are you feeling comfortable with this cash reserve number that is sitting at about 500 million right now? And let me know if you have any other thoughts on the charts, and I'll be sure to update these much more often going forward, especially once we get those Q4 numbers in about a month. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.